The grass is damp beneath you, and the cloud has come down so low that the caldera rim seems to breathe through a veil of white mist. You are standing where lava once moved in slow, glowing rivers, though now the ground is cool and green, softened by moss, heather, ferns, and the patient weather of the Atlantic. Below you, the bowl of the caldera opens gently, not as an empty wound, but as a quiet hollow shaped by time, where lakes gather the sky and slopes fold inward with a kind of ancient stillness. The air smells of wet stone and leaves, and somewhere beyond the rim, beyond the cloud, the ocean surrounds everything with its wide, unseen blue. The Azores rise from the middle of the Atlantic like a chain of green thoughts, each island born from lava, each ridge and hollow written slowly by heat, pressure, cooling, and rain. Here, the land does not feel young when you touch it, though in the language of the earth it is still becoming, still settling, still answering the quiet work of volcanic stone. You can imagine the rim not as a single edge, but as a memory of many edges, built, broken, softened, and built again by flows of molten rock that once spread across the island in thick, luminous sheets. Those flows cooled into dark basalt, into paler domes of trachyte, into rough scoria and glassy fragments, and over long seasons they became soil, pasture, hydrangea banks, and forested slopes. The path beneath your feet follows the high curve of the caldera, and though the wind moves through the grass, everything seems to happen slowly up here, as if the island itself prefers a hushed pace. The rim is not a sharp line so much as a rounded shoulder, where old lava has hardened, weathered, and slumped into a contour that feels almost gentle beneath the soles. Far below, the water in the caldera lakes rests in deep color, sometimes green, sometimes blue, sometimes silver, when the cloud opens and the light returns without hurry. The lakes occupy places made by collapse and subsidence, by magma chambers emptying and roofs of rock settling downward, though the result now feels less like an event than a long, quiet exhale. You breathe with it for a while, letting the cool air move in and out, while the rim holds you above the hollow like a calm hand. Around you, the land is layered in silence, but beneath that silence is a story of lava flows arriving one after another, each one finding the easiest path, each one reshaping the slope by yielding to gravity. Lava does not need to hurry to change a mountain because it carries its own patience inside its heat, thickening as it cools, folding over itself, sealing old surfaces beneath new stone. A flow can move across a flank, fill a valley, bank against older ridges, or pour around a resistant dome, and afterward the surface of the island remembers that movement in its shape. On the Azorian caldera rim, that memory is everywhere, though it is often hidden beneath green abundance, under pasture walls, under fern roots, under the soft leaning of shrubs along the path. A rounded ridge may mark the outer edge of an old flow, while a dip in the rim may show where weaker ash layers yielded to rain, and a dark outcrop may reveal the cooled interior of lava that once glowed like an ember beneath its crust. You walk slowly, though the walking is only a way of noticing, because each step passes over a surface that was once liquid, once moving, once bright beneath the open night. The present landscape is quiet enough to seem eternal, yet it was made by change, by repeated pulses from below, by molten stone rising through fractures and spreading into forms that the weather would later soften. In places, the rim thickens into broad backs of rock where lava accumulated in overlapping lobes, each lobe pressing forward until its margins cooled and stiffened. These old lobes, now covered with grass and lichen, helped strengthen portions of the caldera edge, creating high points that resist erosion with a slow and durable weight. In other places, the rim lowers and opens slightly, where deposits of ash, pumice, and loose volcanic fragments were easier for rain to carry away. The Azores receive moisture from ocean air, and that moisture is a quiet sculptor, moving grain by grain through the soil, tracing gullies, feeding springs, and wearing the softer parts of the rim into curves. The result is a landscape that seems calm because every sharpness has been visited by cloud, by wind, by root, by rainfall, by the patient chemistry of water moving through porous stone. Even the lava, once hot enough to glow from within, has become a place for moss to drink, for lichens to bloom in pale circles, and for ferns to lean out from shaded cracks. You can stand near an outcrop and see how the rock changes from one layer to the next, as if the island has stacked old afternoons inside itself. A dark, dense band may be basalt, cooled from a fluid flow, while lighter, more fractured stone may come from stickier lava or ash-rich deposits, and together they form a quiet page of geology. Nothing here asks to be dramatic, because the scale is already enough, and the rim does not need to announce itself with cliffs or edges to feel vast. It only needs to curve around the caldera, green and cloud-brushed, holding the memory of collapse inside the memory of growth, while the ocean wind moves over it with patient breath. The lava that shaped these rims came from deep below the islands, where the Earth's mantle supplied heat and melt beneath a region of spreading, faulting, and long volcanic construction. In simple terms, the islands rose because magma reached upward again and again, building seamounts until some broke the sea surface and then continued to grow under the open sky. Once above water, lava began to behave differently than it had in the deep sea, because it could meet air, rain, slopes, and older volcanic land. Thin basaltic flows could travel outward in broad tongues, while thicker and more viscous lavas gathered near vents, forming domes, ridges, and steep-sided masses that later helped frame caldera walls. You can feel that difference in the ground, not as a lesson, but as a texture beneath the island's calm surface. Some parts of the rim feel broad and steady because fluid lava once spread there in layers, while other parts feel more irregular because thicker lava piled up, fractured, and cooled into forms that resisted the easy smoothing of weather. When lava cools, it contracts, and its surface may crack into patterns that are later widened by rain, roots, and salt-laden air carried inland from the Atlantic. These cracks become small pathways for life, and over time the stone gathers a skin of green, as if the island is covering its fiery beginnings with a softer memory. The caldera itself forms when the volcanic summit can no longer hold its shape in the same way, often after magma has withdrawn from beneath it, leaving the overlying rock to settle downward. Yet even this settling, which sounds immense when explained in words, now appears as stillness, as a bowl holding water, pasture, forest, and the slow passing of clouds. After caldera formation, lava did not simply stop being part of the landscape, because later flows and domes could rise within the hollow or near the rim. These younger materials modified the edge, buttressed sections of the wall, filled low ground, and added new shapes to the older ring, so the rim became less like one boundary and more like a conversation. That conversation continues with water, because rain gathers on the high ground and slips down through soils made from volcanic ash and weathered lava. It feeds small streams, saturates slopes, and carries minerals into the lakes. And in this quiet exchange, the island keeps altering itself without needing flame or sound. The cloud begins to thin for a moment, and the opposite side of the caldera appears across the hollow, a distant arc of green rising through a pale opening in the weather. You can see how the rim is uneven, how some high shoulders stand firm while other saddles dip gently, and this unevenness is the visible trace of varied lava, ash, collapse, erosion, and time. Every island in the Azores has its own version of this language, because each volcano grew through different pulses and different kinds of magma. Sete Cidades, Furnas, Fogo, Caldera on Fayal, the great cone of Pico nearby, and the smaller volcanic forms across the archipelago all share a deep origin. Yet each one speaks with a distinct accent of stone. Here, on the rim, the most important feeling is not the ancient heat, but the quiet after it, because the land has had time to cool into pasture and forest. Cows graze where lava once hardened, hydrangeas gather along roads and walls, and the wind carries the scent of wet leaves over rock that remembers a more luminous beginning. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can imagine the shape of a lava flow without needing to see its brightness. It would move by yielding, by following slope and weight, its outer skin cooling first while the warmer interior continued forward beneath a darkening crust. And in that slow motion, it would leave behind a form. Some flows build levees along their edges, raised margins of cooled lava that guide the still-moving interior like banks along a river. When such forms weather into the landscape, they can leave subtle ridges, sometimes disguised by grass, sometimes revealed by outcrop, and they help explain why a rim may feel lifted or reinforced in one place and gentler in another. Other flows arrive thick and slow, stacking near their source, folding and wrinkling as they cool because the molten rock cannot travel far before becoming stiff. These thicker lavas may create knobs, domes, and resistant masses on or near the caldera rim, and later the weather moves around them as water moves around a stone in a stream. In the Azores, water is almost always present, whether as mist on your face, rain in the grass, cloud over the ridges, or lake water shining from the hollow below. The meeting of volcanic rock and oceanic climate gives the rim its softness, because moisture enters the stone, nourishes roots, and turns rough surfaces into soil with a quiet persistence. The soil itself is part of the volcanic story, made from ash, broken lava, organic matter, and minerals released through slow weathering. It can be dark and rich, able to hold water, able to support the lush growth that makes these islands seem at first glance like pure green rather than cooled fire. You look down at the ground and notice how the path is edged with low plants, each leaf holding small beads of water left by passing cloud. Beneath them, there may be pumice grains light enough to float when fresh, basalt fragments dense and dark, and altered volcanic glass becoming clay in the long quiet of rain. The caldera rim is therefore not only a shape made by lava, but a place where lava has been translated into living surface. The hard stone becomes shelter for roots, the ash becomes fertile soil, the cracks become channels, and the old volcanic ring becomes an ecosystem of moss, birds, insects, shrubs, and silence. A bird crosses the mist somewhere above you, though it is only a small movement, quickly softened by distance. The larger movement is the cloud itself, traveling over the rim from the Atlantic, rising with the land, cooling, condensing, and laying moisture across the volcanic slopes as if it were slowly polishing the island. That ocean air is part of the shaping process, because the Azores sit in a place where weather arrives generously from the sea. Wind and rain do not erase the volcanic forms all at once, but they round them, soften them, open them, and make the caldera rim feel less like a boundary and more like a living threshold. From this high edge, the caldera is both inward and outward, both bowl and horizon, because you can turn one way toward the lakes and another toward the hidden ocean. The rim gathers these directions into one gentle curve, and the lava flows that helped build it seem to hold the island between depth below and weather above. As you continue along the path, the ground rises slowly, and the grass brightens where the mist loosens for a few breaths. You may pass dark stones and old walls placed by human hands much later, but drawn from the same volcanic body of the island, stones whose vesicles still hold tiny rounded hollows left by ancient gas. Those small hollows, called vesicles, formed when gases dissolved in molten lava came out of solution as pressure changed and the rock cooled. Now they are tiny pockets in stone, sometimes filled with minerals, sometimes empty, and they give the rock a porous softness that catches water, soil, and the thin silver threads of roots. A lava flow can be dense at its center and more open near its top, where bubbles gathered before the surface hardened. When such a flow becomes part of a caldera rim, its different textures weather at different rates. So the rim's shape is not only a matter of large collapse, but also of tiny internal details. This is one of the calmer truths of geology, that great landscapes are made from very small differences repeated across long spans of time. A bubble in cooling lava, a crack from contraction, a layer of ash, a root finding water, a raindrop carrying a grain downhill. All of these join the slow making of a rim. The rim beneath you feels whole, but it is made of many moments resting together, and each moment has its own temperature, texture, chemistry, and pace. Some moments were bright and molten, some were cool and wet, some were buried under later flows, and some have only recently emerged from beneath grass at the edge of a path. You can let that thought become restful rather than large, because there is comfort in knowing that the land does not need to be finished. The Azores are still part of an active geological region, but the feeling here, in this misted hour, is one of steady becoming, where even change moves with an island's patience. The caldera rim holds the trace of magma chambers below, vents along flanks, lava traveling outward, and roofs of rock settling inward. Yet all of that has become a quiet contour, a walkable arc through wet grass, where the past is not gone, but folded gently under the present green. The lakes below may reflect a patch of brightness now, and the water seems to glow from within, though it is only the sky finding a break in the cloud. Around their edges, slopes descend in layers of vegetation and volcanic sediment, and the whole basin feels like a calm eye looking upward through the weather. In such places, it is easy to forget that lava helped shape the high rim as much as the hollow below, because the eye is drawn to water, to color, to the softened drama of the bowl. But the rim is the keeper of the story, the raised circumference where flows thickened, fractured, resisted, yielded, and were later carved into their present line. Imagine a sequence of old lava flows advancing across the growing volcano, long before the rim had the quiet outline it has now. One flow covers older ash, another fills a shallow depression, another banks against a ridge, another cools into a resistant cap, and eventually the summit region becomes a layered mass with strengths and weaknesses hidden inside stone. When collapse comes in geological time, the stronger parts do not respond exactly like the weaker parts, and the ring that remains carries that uneven inheritance. Sections capped by dense lava may stand higher, while sectors rich in ash or fractured material may settle, erode, or open into gentler saddles, and afterward rain begins its patient work. The rim is therefore a collaboration between construction and removal, between the lava that added height and the weather that took material away. This is why its shape feels natural and softened rather than perfectly circular, because the island was never drawn with a compass, but shaped by moving rock, settling ground, and water. A low cloud touches your cheek again, and the world narrows to the path, the grass, and a few dark stones shiny with moisture. In this softened visibility, the rim becomes intimate, and instead of seeing the whole caldera, you notice details close at hand. The bead of water on a leaf, the rough skin of lava, the deep green of a fern. The deep ocean surrounds the Azores, but here the descent is not downward through water, it is inward through layers of time. You move along the caldera edge as if moving through the cooling history of the island, from molten flow to black rock, from black rock to soil, from soil to living quiet. There is a kind of sleepiness in such a landscape, not because it is empty, but because its movements are too slow to disturb you. The grass grows without urgency, the mist passes without sound, the lakes hold their color, and the lava beneath all of it rests in cooled folds like an old blanket. As the path bends, the slope on one side drops toward the caldera interior, while the outer flank descends toward the unseen sea. This double slope matters, because lava once moved over these gradients, sometimes outward from summit vents, sometimes along fractures, sometimes pooling or thickening where the land allowed a slower settling. On a volcanic island, gravity is always quietly present, guiding molten rock when it flows, guiding rain when it falls, guiding loose sediment when it slips down slope. The rim's present form is a record of that guidance, because every ridge, hollow, and softened shoulder has been influenced by the simple downward pull of Earth. Even after lava hardens, gravity continues its gentle task. As weathered blocks loosen, soils creep, and saturated slopes adjust over long wet seasons. These movements are not always visible in a single day, but they help round the rim, blending old flow margins into the green continuity that makes the caldera feel so calm. You may notice that the vegetation changes with exposure, because windward slopes receive more cloud and moisture, while sheltered hollows may feel warmer, quieter, and more enclosed. Plants respond to these small differences, and so the volcanic form shapes the ecosystem, while the ecosystem softens the volcanic form in return, leaf by leaf and root by root. The caldera rim is a meeting place of processes, where magma, air, rain, gravity, and life have all touched the same curve. None of them owns it completely, And perhaps that is why it feels peaceful, because the landscape is not a monument to one moment, but a long blending of many forces. A dark outcrop appears beside the path, half hidden by moss, and its surface shows faint lines where cooling and fracturing gave the lava a structure. You can imagine heat leaving the flow into the air, into the ground, into passing rain, and as the rock contracted, it began to divide itself into shapes that would later guide weathering. Sometimes, cooling lava forms columns, especially where heat escapes steadily and contraction cracks arrange themselves in regular patterns. On the Azores, columnar joints, blocky textures, and fractured lava faces can appear where erosion has opened a view into older flows, showing that even cooling has its own quiet geometry. That geometry is not separate from the softness around it, because cracks become ledges, ledges become pockets of soil, and pockets of soil become small gardens of moss and fern. Over time, the hard pattern of cooling turns into habitat, and the volcanic rim becomes a place where stone and tenderness are not opposites at all. The mist lifts again, and for a few moments the caldera floor seems deeper, its lakes lying far below like polished fragments of sky. The distance is gentle, not dizzying, because the slopes are softened by green, and the old volcanic walls descend in layered folds that make depth feel almost breathable. You can let your attention move slowly from the water to the slopes, from the slopes to the rim, and from the rim into the rock beneath you. There, beneath the quiet path, the hidden architecture of lava flows continues to hold the land in place even as rain enters, plants root, and the surface becomes soft. This is how lava shaped the caldera rim, not only by arriving in brightness, but by becoming the material through which every later process had to work. It built resistant caps and ridges, filled old lows, created flow margins, formed cracks and textures, and offered different strengths to the patient shaping hands of weather and time. The island does not remember all of this in words, but it keeps the evidence in contours, in stones, in soils, in the way a path rises or a hollow gathers water. You do not need to read it quickly, and in fact it is better not to, because the rim gives its meaning most gently when you let your noticing drift. The wind moves lightly through the grass, and the cloud folds over the ridge once more, softening the far side of the caldera until it disappears. The world becomes close again, a few meters of wet path and green stems, and the unseen bowl beside you feels larger because it is hidden by mist. In this whitened quiet, the ancient lava seems less like fire and more like sleep, a heat that spent itself and entered rest. It lies under pasture, under fern, under the path and the moss, holding the shape of the island with a calmness that feels older than memory, though the earth would call it relatively young. You continue along the rim, not trying to arrive anywhere, while the ground rises and falls with the slow breath of volcanic form. Each bend reveals another curve of the caldera edge, another hint of how lava once moved, cooled, and hardened into a rim that now carries cloud, grass, and silence. Far below, the lakes receive whatever light can pass through the sky, and their surfaces change without making a sound you can hear. They are held by the caldera, and the caldera is held by the volcanic island, and the island is held by the Atlantic, which stretches away beyond the mist in every direction. The feeling is layered, like the rock itself, because you are standing in the present while sensing the long cooling beneath it. The damp air, the green rim, the hidden flows, the old collapse, the rain-shaped slopes, and the quiet lakes all belong to one patient landscape, one slow volcanic breath. And as you move deeper into that breath, the island seems to settle around you, not closing in but drawing you gently into its calm. The caldera rim is no longer only a high place to look from, but a resting edge between what rose from below and what softened under the sky. And you can follow it slowly onward, where the path bends around a shoulder of old stone and the caldera opens again through the passing mist. The grass leans all one way here, shaped by years of ocean wind, and beneath it, the rim keeps its slow volcanic curve, broad and uneven and quietly strong. You can feel how the land rises not in one clean wall, but in layered backs of lava, ash, and weathered rock. each softened by rain until its edges seem almost woven into the hillside. The caldera's outline is not a perfect ring because lava rarely makes perfect things, and collapse rarely follows a line that could be drawn smoothly by hand. Instead, the rim carries small hesitations, high places, low places, inward slopes, outward slopes, and narrow saddles where cloud gathers and spills over like water. These variations are part of its beauty because they show how the island accepted each new event and then slowly folded it into one continuous landscape. Long ago, when molten rock spread across the growing volcano, it did not know that one day it would help define a caldera edge. It simply moved where the ground allowed it to move, thickening in shallow hollows, slowing against older ridges, and cooling into dark surfaces that would later become the high green rim. Some flows may have poured outward from vents near the summit, their interiors staying hot while their surfaces stiffened into rough, dark crusts. Other eruptions may have produced more viscous lava, slower and heavier, building domes and short lobes that rose like rounded knuckles along the volcanic landscape, giving the future rim a stronger skeleton. As the island grew, those different materials rested over one another, not neatly, but in overlapping sheets and pockets. A dense lava layer could protect what lay beneath it, while a looser ash bed might be opened more easily by water, and this quiet difference helped decide where the rim would remain high and where it would be lowered by rain. The land beneath you is therefore not a single surface, but a stack of decisions made by heat, cooling, gravity, and weather. Each layer has its own way of holding water, its own way of breaking, its own way of resisting roots and wind, and together they make the rim feel gently alive. You walk across that hidden architecture without disturbing it, your steps light on the damp path, while the old lava rests underneath. The island seems to breathe through its soils, because water moves down through porous rock, air collects in tiny spaces, and roots thread through cracks that began as cooling fractures. Some cracks began when the lava contracted as it lost heat, drawing inward on itself after the brightness had gone. Others came from later movement, from settling, from the slow adjustment of the volcano after magma had withdrawn below, and each fracture became a place where rain could enter with patient hands. Rain is soft, but it is never idle, and in the Azores it returns so often that even hard stone must learn its rhythm. It seeps into cracks, loosens minerals, carries fine particles downslope, and helps turn the surface of lava into soil, so that the rim's rough volcanic beginning becomes green with time. The cloud presses close again, and the distant lakes disappear, leaving only pale air where the caldera had opened. In that temporary whiteness, you can almost sense the rim by feeling rather than sight, the ground falling gently inward on one side and outward toward the hidden Atlantic on the other. This double falling is one of the quiet gifts of a caldera rim, because it allows you to stand between two slopes and two histories. Inside is the basin of collapse, where the summit settled and rain gathered into lakes, while outside are the flanks built by lava flows, descending gradually toward the surrounding sea. The outer slope carries the memory of construction, of lava adding mass to the island and spreading outward from its volcanic center. The inner slope carries the memory of removal and settling, where the summit lost support, the ground lowered, and later weather softened the broken walls into a green descending hollow. Between those two memories lies the rim, a place where addition and loss meet in a long, quiet curve. It is not only the edge of a crater, and not only the top of a slope, but the border where lava's building and collapse's settling have learned to rest together in balance. Here, the lava flows shaped the rim by giving it substance, by determining which parts could stand after the caldera formed and which parts would wear down more quickly. The stronger flows remain like low bones under moss and pasture, while ashier or more fractured zones accept water more easily and become softened saddles beneath the cloud. If you could lift the grass without harming it, and lift the soil without scattering it, you would see that the green surface is only the latest layer. Below it would be old flow tops, rubbly zones, denser interiors, vesicular bands, pale alteration minerals, and places where water has painted the rock in quiet tones of brown, red, and gold. Those colors come from the chemistry of weathering, from iron in volcanic minerals meeting oxygen and water over long stretches of damp island air. The fiery red of fresh heat is gone, yet a gentler, earth-colored memory remains, held in stains, clays, and softened surfaces where lava has slowly become land. You pause where the path widens, and the wind drops for a moment, leaving the grass almost still. In the quiet, the rim feels less like a boundary and more like a resting place for everything that has passed through the island, from magma below to cloud above, from eruption to meadow. The Azores sit where deep geological forces have allowed magma to rise through the oceanic crust, building islands from submarine beginnings into green summits. Every caldera rim here is tied to that larger story, yet each rim is also deeply local, shaped by its own eruptions, its own collapses, and its own long conversation with weather. The ocean is never far from this landscape, even when you cannot see it, because its moisture arrives in the air and its winds move over every ridge. Salt may travel inland in tiny invisible grains, cloud may wrap the high ground for hours, and rainfall may return again and again, making the volcanic stone receptive to change. On a dry continent, lava can keep its roughness for a very long time, standing sharp beneath a bright sky. Here, in the ocean's green climate, roughness softens more readily, and the caldera rim becomes cloaked in vegetation, until the old volcanic lines seem to rise from beneath a living coverlet. This does not erase the geology, though it makes it quieter, and perhaps more suited to late wandering and sleep. The hidden forms remain, guiding water, shaping soil, supporting slopes, and giving the path its subtle rise and fall, even when moss and leaves have softened the visible stone. As you continue, you pass a place where water has collected in a shallow track, darkening the soil and reflecting a small piece of sky. The puddle sits on compacted ground above volcanic layers that may drain slowly or quickly depending on their texture. And even this small brightness belongs to the rim's science. Some lava layers are permeable, especially where they are broken, vesicular, or rubbly at the top and base of a flow. Others are denser and less willing to let water through, so rainfall may perch above them, move sideways along them, or emerge lower on the slope as springs and seeps. This hidden movement of water helps shape the caldera rim from within, because saturated zones can weaken slopes, nourish plants, and concentrate weathering along certain layers. A small spring on a slope may tell of lava textures underground, of the way one flow accepted water and another gently turned it aside toward the light. The plants respond to this unseen plumbing, gathering more thickly where moisture lingers and thinning where wind and drainage keep the ground drier. Ferns crowd damp hollows, grasses hold open ridges, moss settles on shaded stones, and each plant helps the rim become softer while depending on the shape that lava first gave. It is a quiet exchange, and nothing in it feels hurried. The lava provides height and mineral richness, the rain provides movement and release, the plants provide roots and shade, and over time, the caldera rim becomes an ecosystem resting on volcanic memory. A patch of exposed rock rises beside the trail, its face dark and rough where weather has not yet fully covered it. The surface is pitted with small hollows, and in those hollows water gathers briefly after rain, leaving tiny worlds for algae, lichens, and the first fine threads of moss. The stone may once have been the upper surface of a lava flow where gases escaped and the cooling crust became open and irregular. Now that old texture gathers life, and the place where bubbles once rose through molten rock becomes a quiet cradle for green growth in the Atlantic air. Farther along, the rock changes again and you may see a paler, more crumbly layer tucked between darker lava bands. Such layers can come from explosive phases, when volcanic ash, pumice, and fragments settled over the landscape before later flows arrived, creating weaker horizons that water could later open. These weaker layers matter to the rim because a caldera edge is shaped not only by what stands firm, but also by what gives way. Rain and gravity find the softer beds, roots enter them, small slips begin, and the rim gradually takes on its rounded profile, less like a cut edge and more like a folded cloth. This softness does not mean fragility in a fearful sense. because the landscape has been adjusting for a very long time. It means that the rim is participating in the ordinary life of landforms, changing by small increments, yielding here, holding there, and keeping its overall calm shape. The caldera below returns through the mist, first as a darkening of space, then as a widening green slope, then as water reflecting a dim patch of sky. Nothing appears all at once, and the slow unveiling suits the place because the history of the rim also reveals itself gradually, one texture and one curve at a time. You see the lake again, still and distant, resting in the basin where volcanic collapse made room for water. Its surface is smoother than the path, smoother than the grass, smoother than the broken stone, and yet it depends on them all, held by the surrounding rim like a quiet thought. Water in the lake records the present weather, while the rim records the deeper past, though both are always changing. The lake rises and falls with rain, the slopes breathe with moisture, the vegetation thickens and thins, and the lava beneath remains still enough to give everything a steady ground. There is something comforting in that difference, in the way a landscape can hold movement and stillness at the same time. Clouds drift, water gathers, plants grow, soils deepen, and beneath them old flows stay folded into the rim, no longer bright, but enduring in a cooled and gentle form. The Azorean light has a softness that belongs to islands, because the sky is often filtered through ocean air before it reaches the ground. On the caldera rim, that light does not strike harshly, but rests on leaves, stones, and wet grass, revealing the volcanic shapes without taking away their quiet. When the sun does break through, it can brighten the slopes in patches, and the rim seems to rise and recede under moving bands of silver. The lake may turn blue for a moment, then green, then grey again, while the old lava remains underneath all these changes, receiving each colour without hurry. In the far wall of the caldera, you can sometimes see the layered construction more clearly, especially where vegetation thins or a road cut reveals the rock. Dark flows, paler deposits, and weathered bands may alternate along the slope, showing that the rim was built by many episodes, rather than a single act. This is important, because a caldera rim is not simply the lip left after collapse, but also the product of everything that existed before collapse occurred. The lava flows that built the summit, the ash layers between them, the intrusive bodies cooling below, and the later deposits laid on top all help decide the rim's final form. The collapse may have created the basin, but the materials already present gave the basin its character. A volcano made mostly of one kind of rock might settle and erode differently from one with mixed lava flows, loose pyroclastic beds, and domes of stickier magma, so each caldera becomes a distinct place. Here, that distinction is wrapped in green, which makes the science feel less like analysis and more like listening. The rocks do not speak aloud, but their layers, slopes, springs, and curves offer a patient explanation of how hot material became a high rim under cloud. You continue along the rounded edge, and the path becomes a little softer where soil has thickened over the old volcanic surface. Your steps are quiet, and the island seems to absorb them, as if the rim has taken in so much rain and wind that it has learned the art of muffling. The soil underfoot may hold fragments from many eruptions, mixed by roots, worms, weather, and the slow movement of slope wash. A grain of basalt, a fleck of pumice, a clay particle made from altered glass, and a dark thread of organic matter all rest together in the same earth. This blending is one of the ways lava becomes landscape rather than only rock. First it cools, then it cracks, then it weathers, then it supports life, and eventually its fragments lose their separate identity inside the living soil of the rim. Yet the shape remains, even as the surface changes, because the deeper structure still guides where the ground stands high and where it bows inward. Beneath grass and hydrangea, beneath moss and low shrubs, the older flows continue to influence the curve of the caldera, like a remembered melody beneath a quiet voice. You may not see every flow, but you can sense their presence in the way the land holds itself. A high rounded shoulder suggests durable rock below, while a gentler dip may hint at softer deposits, and together these small signals make the walk feel like moving across a hidden map. The map is not drawn in ink, but in resistance, drainage, slope, and vegetation. It is read slowly by rain, by roots, by geologists with patient eyes, and by anyone willing to stand quietly on the rim and notice how the island's form seems to breathe. The cloud thins again, and beyond the outer slope there is a suggestion of ocean, a paler brightness at the edge of sight. The Atlantic surrounds the island so completely that every caldera rim is also a place of exposure, receiving winds that have traveled across water before climbing the volcanic heights. Those winds carry moisture upward, and when the air cools over the high rim, cloud forms and clings to the slopes. This is why the vegetation can be so lush, why moss finds stone so readily, and why the old lava seems to wear green as naturally as night wears stars. The rim is high enough to catch weather, but not so high that it feels severe, and this balance gives the landscape its gentle abundance. It is a place where volcanic height, ocean climate, and patient growth meet, creating a soft edge around a basin born from deep geological change. As you walk, the caldera's curve becomes less like a line and more like a slow turning of the world around you. The path follows that turning, and your thoughts can follow it too, not needing to finish quickly, not needing to explain everything at once, just resting inside the arc. The arc was made partly by absence, by the missing summit that settled down, and partly by presence, by all the lava and fragmental rock that remained. This joining of absence and presence gives calderas their special feeling, because they are both hollow and mountain, both opening and enclosure, both loss and shelter. Lava flows helped shape the sheltering part, giving mass to the rim and laying down strong layers that could outlast softer material. Later, when the summit changed and the basin formed, those flows became part of the high boundary that now holds lake water, cloud shadow, and silence. There may have been moments when molten rock returned after the main collapse, emerging within or near the caldera and adding new forms to the interior. Such post-caldera activity can create cones, domes, or small lava fields that alter drainage and slope, adding younger textures to the older ring without disturbing its deeper calm. Over time, these younger forms also weather, and the landscape gathers them into the same green vocabulary as the rest of the island. What began as a new extrusion, rough and warm, eventually becomes a rounded hill, a damp hollow, a plant-covered slope, and another quiet note in the caldera's music. The word rim can sound simple, but here it contains many kinds of time. There is the fast time of eruption, the slower time of cooling, the longer time of collapse and erosion, and the living time of leaves opening and falling season after season. You are walking through all of them at once, though nothing asks you to separate them. The damp grass, the old lava, the lake below, the mist above, and the unseen ocean beyond the slope all seem to share one unhurried tempo. A small stone loosens from the edge of the path and rests against a tuft of grass, revealing a darker patch of soil beneath. It is a tiny event, almost nothing, yet it belongs to the same family of processes that shape the rim, because even great landforms change through small movements repeated over years. A grain moves, a root widens a crack, a trickle finds a line of weakness, and a slope adjusts by less than the width of a hand. The caldera rim accepts these changes without losing itself, just as a sleeping body shifts under a blanket and remains deeply at rest. This is the atmosphere of the Azores Rim, a place where the Earth's inner heat has already become cool enough to hold dew. It reminds you that volcanic landscapes do not remain fiery in their everyday presence, because most of their lives are spent in quiet weather, under plants, under passing clouds. The old flows are not gone, but they are no longer moving as lava, and that transformation is part of the piece here. They have become ledges, slopes, drainage lines, pasture stones, mineral grains, and shadowed outcrops where moss grows thickly in the damp air. You can imagine the first cooling crust on a flow, darkening while the interior still glowed, and then imagine the same surface centuries later covered in lichens. Between those images lies a long cooling of the world, a movement from heat toward shelter, from brightness toward green, from molten motion toward stillness. As the path descends slightly along the rim, the lake shifts lower in your view, and the far wall becomes a layered softness across the basin. The slopes are steep in places, but vegetation gives them a gentler face, and the whole caldera seems to have settled into the slow posture of rest. The rim's shape guides how water reaches the lake, because rain falling near the inner edge may run or seep toward the basin. Rain falling just beyond the crest may travel outward toward streams that descend the island's flanks, and so a narrow zone of old lava decides the direction of countless drops of water. This watershed quality makes the rim feel even more delicate, not fragile, but finely balanced. A step to one side belongs to the inward world of the caldera lake, while a step to the other belongs to the outward world of ravines, slopes, and the surrounding Atlantic. The lava flows that built the crest therefore shape not only the visible edge, but also the hidden paths of water across the island. Their textures, thicknesses, and fractures influence drainage, erosion, soil moisture, and plant communities, so the old heat continues to guide present life in the quietest ways. You breathe in, and the air is cool enough to make the inside of your chest feel clean and open. It carries the scent of wet grass and volcanic earth, and perhaps the faint mineral smell that rises after rain from stone that has been damp for a very long time. There is no need to hurry along the rim, because the landscape itself teaches slowness. It took lava time to flow, time to cool, time to be broken into soil, and time to become the soft green edge you follow now in the folded mist. Every few steps, the view changes only slightly, and that slightness is part of the comfort. A fern appears, a stone wall fades behind cloud, the lake brightens and dims, and the rim continues beneath you with the steadiness of an old song. As evening light begins to soften behind the cloud, the greens of the caldera grow deeper and less separate from one another. The rim, the slopes, the lakeshore, and the distant vegetation blend into layers of shadow, while the volcanic forms beneath them become less visible and more felt. This is when the history of lava becomes almost dreamlike, because you are no longer studying stone so much as resting on it. The flows that once advanced with heat have become a quiet support, holding you above the caldera, holding the path, holding the moisture and roots and darkening grass. The island seems to lower its voice. Wind moves gently over the crest, cloud passes in slow veils, and the caldera below receives the dimming light as if it has been waiting all day to become this quiet. You continue along the curve, and the rim carries you onward, shaped by lava, softened by rain, and wrapped in the deep patience of the Atlantic air. Beneath every footstep, the cooled flows remain, not as a memory of force, but as a foundation for stillness, and the path follows their hidden shapes into the growing dusk. And the dusk does not arrive quickly, but gathers itself in layers, first in the hollows, then under the ferns, then along the darker places of the stone. The caldera rim seems to hold the last of the light a little longer than the basin below, because high ground often receives the evening slowly, letting the sky fade over it in a broad and gentle way. The old lava beneath you has known many kinds of light, from the glow within its own molten body to the grey softness of cloud and the silver of rain. Now it receives the evening without heat, and its roughness is hidden by soil, roots, and grass, though the shape it made remains quietly present beneath the path. In the Azores, lava flows did not simply cover the land. They built the land upward from the sea, adding slope upon slope until the island could hold cloud on its shoulders. Each flow cooled into a surface that later became a foundation for another, and in that patient accumulation the future caldera rim gained its height, its curve, and its uneven strength. You can imagine those early surfaces lying open beneath a younger sky, dark and steaming after rain, with the ocean surrounding the newborn island on every side. The flows may have been rough in places, smooth in others, broken into blocks or folded into ropes, and all of those textures would later influence how water, soil, and life settled into the rim. Some basaltic lavas, when fluid enough, spread outward in broad sheets that could travel farther down the volcanic slopes before cooling fully. They helped make gentler outer flanks, while thicker and more viscous lava stayed closer to vents and added bulk near the summit, where the caldera rim would one day stand in mist. That difference between flowing far and staying close is one of the quiet reasons the rim has its particular form. The more mobile flows stretch the island outward, while the slower ones thickened the high ground, and between them they made a volcanic body with strong layers, weak layers, and many places for later weather to enter. The path follows a crest where those histories meet, and the ground feels steady, though it has been shaped by so many changes. You do not need to see the lava moving to feel what it did, because the rim itself is the cooled movement, the resting trace of molten stone that once accepted gravity and became land. The air cools more as evening deepens, and the mist begins to settle into the low grasses with a soft, almost invisible weight. Each blade bends under tiny drops of water, and every drop reflects a dim piece of sky, making the rim glitter faintly as if the old volcanic ground were remembering stars. Below, the lake has become darker and more inward-looking, holding the last light in a smooth, muted surface. The caldera walls descend toward it in green shadow, and their slopes reveal, even in fading light, how lava-built strength and rain-carved softness share the same quiet basin. Where a dense lava flow forms a cap, the slope may stand a little steeper, keeping its form longer against rain and root. Where ashier material lies exposed, the land may round itself more easily, and the rim takes on those subtle dips and softened passes that make walking here feel like following a slow wave. A caldera rim can look simple from far away, just a circle of high land around a hollow, but close by it becomes full of small decisions. The ground rises by a few steps, then eases downward, then lifts again over a resistant shoulder of rock, as if the old flows are still guiding your body without speaking. The island's volcanic history is not written in one bold line, but in many gentle gradients of hardness and porosity, color and texture, slope and drainage. This is why the rim is best understood slowly, because every feature belongs to more than one process, and every process has been softened by the patient presence of weather. You pass a stretch of ground where the grass grows thicker and the soil feels darker underfoot, holding moisture from the cloud like a sponge. The old lava here may be fractured below, or an ash-rich layer may be catching water near the surface, creating a damp pocket where plants gather in quiet abundance. A few steps later, the ground becomes firmer and more stony, and the vegetation changes into lower growth adapted to wind and thinner soil. The difference is small, but it is meaningful, because lava flows are not uniform blankets, and their hidden textures continue to shape the living rim long after their heat has gone. This is one of the softest ways to think about volcanic landscapes, as places where fire becomes variation, and variation becomes habitat. A crack becomes a root path, a vesicle becomes a tiny reservoir, a flow boundary becomes a line of moisture, and the caldera edge becomes a braided home for small lives. Insects may move quietly in the grass, unseen in the lowering light, while birds settle into sheltered places along the slopes. Moss holds water against old stone, lichens slow themselves across exposed surfaces, and ferns lean from damp ledges where the rock offers shade, mineral grains, and a patient hold. Nothing about this ecosystem needs urgency, because the rim has become a place of small continuities. Moisture arrives, roots deepen, leaves fall, soil forms, and the old flows beneath them carry the whole arrangement with a steady, cooled stillness that belongs to volcanic time. The mist shifts, and for a moment the outer flank of the island appears beyond the rim, descending gently toward the unseen ocean. Its slope is also a lava story, built by flows moving away from the summit, each one adding another skin to the island and carrying its surface a little farther into the Atlantic air. The inner slope, by contrast, faces the caldera hollow, where collapse and erosion have opened the island's upper layers for the eye to read. It is quieter now, covered by green, but in its shape you can sense the way the summit once changed, how the center lowered, while the rim remained as a raised memory. Between the two slopes, the crest of the rim holds the balance, and you walk through that balance with unhurried steps. To one side, water gathers inward and descends toward the lake. To the other, rain begins its longer journey outward, down ravines and pastures towards the surrounding sea. The lava that shaped this crest therefore shaped a watershed, a delicate line where falling rain chooses different futures. One drop may end in the calm caldera lake, another may reach an outer stream, and both choices are guided by cooled rock that has been waiting here in silence. It is calming to think of water moving this way, not as a rush, but as a long listening to the shape of the ground. Rain touches grass, enters soil, meets fractured lava, pauses above denser layers, and finally emerges somewhere lower, carrying with it a faint mineral trace of the island's body. Those minerals come from the slow alteration of volcanic glass and crystals, from feldspar, pyroxene, olivine, and other ingredients released little by little. In the quiet chemistry of wet rock, lava becomes nourishment, and the caldera rim becomes not only a structure, but a source of fertility. The darkness now is still gentle, not complete, and the cloud glows faintly with the last light above the horizon. The path remains visible as a softer line through the grass, and every step seems to lower the mind into the same slow rhythm as the weather, the slope, and the cooled stone. You continue around a curve where the rim broadens, and the caldera feels farther away for a while, hidden behind low shrubs and folds of ground. This is how the landscape keeps changing its nearness, sometimes offering a wide basin view, sometimes drawing you close to leaves, rocks, droplets, and the small inward world of the trail. A volcanic rim is not only a viewpoint, though many people come to it for the view, because its deepest meaning is underfoot. It is a place where the inside of the island comes near the surface, where layers made by eruption, cooling, collapse, and weathering can be sensed through slope and texture. You may place a hand on a damp stone beside the path, and the stone feels cool, grainy, and entirely at rest. It has traveled from molten depth to solid exposure, from red heat to moss-dark silence, and now it gives no sign of urgency, only the calm presence of transformed earth. That transformation is the heart of the rim's peacefulness, because the old lava has changed state so completely. What was once fluid is now support, what was once glowing is now shaded, and what once moved under its own heat now simply holds rain, grass, and evening. The caldera's rounded edge reminds you that intensity is only one moment in a much longer story. Most of the life of lava is spent after cooling, as rock in the rain, as stone under roots, as hillside under cloud, and as soil gradually opening itself to green. In the Azores, this afterlife is especially lush, because the ocean brings moisture, and the volcanic ground offers minerals. The result is a rim that feels almost tender, though its foundation is basalt, trachyte, ash, and old fracture, all resting together beneath the soft surface. The wind returns lightly, combing through the grass without breaking the quiet, and the mist pulls into long, pale strands along the crest. These strands move in the same direction as the path for a while, as if the cloud itself were walking the rim with you, following the curve of lava-shaped ground. As it moves, it hides and reveals the caldera in slow alternation, and this rhythm keeps the eye from holding too tightly to any one view. The basin appears, fades, appears again, and the rim becomes a sequence of gentle unveilings, each one shaped by stone and softened by air. The old flows beneath this place may differ in thickness by many meters, though above them the grass makes everything seem continuous. A thick flow can create a durable bench or ridge, while a thin flow may contribute only a smaller layer to the volcanic stack, yet both become part of the caldera's outline. Even the boundaries between flows matter, because they can act as planes where water moves, where weathering concentrates, and where slopes may gradually loosen. These hidden seams are like quiet lines in fabric, not always visible, but influencing how the whole surface folds and settles through time. When geologists study such places, they look for these relationships, for flow tops, bases, paleosols, ash layers, fractures, and the shapes that reveal direction of movement. But here, in the evening mist, the same story can be felt more softly, as a sense that the ground has depth, memory, and patience. You do not need to name every layer to be held by the landscape. The caldera rim offers its calm without requiring exact language, and the science only deepens that calm, because it shows how many slow processes join to make this place. A small hollow near the path holds darker vegetation, its leaves shinier and broader where water lingers longer after rain. The hollow may follow a subtle weakness in the volcanic layers, or perhaps the edge of an old flow, and the plants have found that hidden line without needing to understand it in words. Life often reads geology directly through need, through moisture, shelter, minerals, and exposure. Ferns know where the shade remains, moss knows where stone stays damp, roots know where cracks allow entry, and birds know where shrubs break the wind along the rim. In this way, lava flows continue to shape behavior, not only landform, because the old rock determines where living things gather and how they move. The caldera edge is a quiet ecosystem built upon cooled fire, where every present softness rests on an ancient act of formation. The lake below darkens further, and its surface becomes less reflective, more like a deep piece of dusk held inside the earth. Around it, the slopes fall in layered silence, and the rim above them seems to curve through the cloud like the edge of a sleeping world. You may feel, standing here, that the island has two kinds of depth. One depth goes downward through rock, through old flows and fractures into the volcanic roots below, while the other goes inward through atmosphere, through mist, quiet, and the patient feeling of evening settling. Both depths meet on the rim, because this is the place where the inner history of the island reaches the open air. The caldera exposes the volcano's structure, while the crest carries the weather, and between the two you are held in a quiet crossing of earth and sky. Long before the present path existed, lava would have followed the easiest gradients from vents and fissures, letting the slope decide its direction. It did not carve the rim in the way a river carves a canyon, but built the materials from which the rim would later be shaped, and that distinction is softly important. A caldera rim is born from both construction and collapse, from lava adding mass and subsidence creating space. The lava flows are the body, the collapse is the hollowing, and weather is the hand that smooths the joined forms into the green arc you follow now. This makes the rim feel less like an edge and more like a slow agreement between different kinds of change. Heat rose, rock flowed, chambers emptied, ground settled, rain fell, plants rooted, and the island answered each process by becoming the shape it could hold. The path enters a more sheltered stretch, where shrubs lean inward and the wind becomes softer, broken by leaves before it reaches you. Here the air feels warmer and the scent of wet vegetation is stronger, mixed with the mineral dampness of volcanic soil resting close beneath the surface. A small trickle crosses the trail, barely more than a shining thread, and slips into grass on the inner side of the rim. Its water may have fallen as mist only hours ago, or as rain earlier in the day, and now it follows a path chosen partly by roots and partly by old lava. The trickle's movement is quiet enough to be almost imaginary, yet it participates in the same shaping as larger streams. It carries a few grains, wets a narrow seam, feeds a patch of moss, and adds its tiny measure to the long softening of the caldera edge. Every landscape has such small movements, but volcanic islands make them especially visible when you slow down. Because the ground is layered, porous, and young in geological terms, water can reveal its structure in springs, damp hollows, sudden green pockets, and dark lines of seepage. You follow the trickle with your eyes only until it vanishes into leaves, and then the rim continues beyond it, curving into the dimness. The sense of descent is not vertical now, but inward and slower, as if each step moves you deeper into the calm of the island's making. The sky lowers, and the cloud becomes less white, more blue-gray, like smoke without fire drifting over cooled volcanic ground. Far below, the lake is nearly the same color, and for a moment the caldera seems filled not with water and air separately, but with one continuous hush. In that hush, the ancient lava flows feel less like past events and more like a kind of deep support beneath the present. They are not moving now, but their shapes continue to organize the silence, holding the rim, guiding the water, and giving the green slopes their settled form. Perhaps this is why volcanic landscapes can feel so restful after they have cooled and weathered. They carry the memory of great energy, but that energy has been folded into stillness, and the contrast gives the land a profound and generous quiet. The AZORES Caldera rim is not empty, and it is not motionless in an absolute sense, because rain, roots, and air are always at work. But their work is slow enough to invite sleep, slow enough that the mind can loosen, following the long curve of the rim, without needing to arrive at certainty. As you move onward, the ground rises once more over a rounded swell that may mark a more resistant body of old lava. The path bends around it gently, respecting the shape, and your walking becomes a small echo of the flow itself, following what the land allows without force or haste. From the top of that swell, the caldera opens in a wider arc, and the opposite rim appears as a soft, dark line through the cloud. It is easy to imagine the entire ring as one continuous feature, but in truth, it is made of many different volcanic segments, each with its own history of flow, fracture, and weathering. Some parts were strengthened by lava that cooled dense and massive, while others were cut by faults or softened by fragmental deposits. Some received later flows, some were altered by hydrothermal fluids, some were carved more deeply by runoff, and all of them have been gathered into the single quiet word, Rin. The word is small, but the place is large. It holds the lake, it holds the weather, it holds the memory of magma and collapse, and it holds your slow passage through the evening as the island becomes darker and more still. You remain near the crest, where the grass is wet and the stones hold the day's coolness, and the Atlantic air moves over everything with a patient touch. The caldera below has almost disappeared again, not because it is gone, but because the mist has returned, and the unseen hollow feels even more spacious inside the dark. This hidden spaciousness is part of the restfulness of the landscape, because the eye no longer has to travel far. It can settle on the nearest fern, the shining path, the curve of a damp stone, while the mind understands that beyond the mist, the great volcanic bowl continues quietly. The lava flows that shape the rim are also partly hidden, and perhaps that is fitting, because they do their work now by being unseen. They hold up the path, influence the slopes, feed the soils, and guide the water, all without needing to show their old brightness to the sky. You can rest in that hiddenness as the evening settles deeper over the island. The rim continues ahead, softened by moss and cloud, and every curve seems to say that even the most fiery beginnings can become calm when given enough rain, enough time, and enough silence. As the path lowers slightly and the grass darkens with gathered moisture, while the rim keeps curving under your steps like a sleeping shore. The caldera is mostly hidden now, yet its presence remains beside you, a spacious inwardness beyond the mist, held by old flows that have cooled into the quiet strength of the island. The air seems thicker here, not heavy but soft with water, as if the cloud has settled close enough to touch every leaf and stone. You can feel the Atlantic in it, carried inland across open water, lifted by the volcanic slopes, and laid gently over the rim as a fine, breathing veil. Beneath that veil, the lava's forms become less visual and more physical, known through slope, texture, footing, and the subtle rise of the ground. You move over surfaces that may once have been flow fronts, levees, or hardened crusts, though now they are softened into pasture and trail, their volcanic identity resting below the green skin. A flow front, when fresh, can be thick and broken, where cooling lava pushes against its own stiffening surface and crumbles into angular blocks. Later, after rain and roots have worked through it for centuries, that rough front may become a rounded bank or a stony shoulder on the rim, holding soil in pockets and lifting the path by a few quiet steps. The old motion remains in the land, not as movement now, but as direction remembered by shape. A lobe may point downhill beneath grass, a ridge may trace a cooled margin, and a hollow may mark where softer material between flows has weathered more deeply into the calm earth. You can imagine molten rock advancing slowly under a dark crust, its inner heat protected for a while by the shell it made around itself. The outer surface would wrinkle, crack, and thicken, while the deeper part continued to feed the flow forward, and when everything finally cooled, the path of that movement became a lasting form. That lasting form is why lava can shape a caldera rim even after collapse changes the summit, because the rock does not vanish when the center settles. It remains as a layered inheritance, strong in some places, fractured in others, and every later process must negotiate with what the earlier flows have left. Rain negotiates with it patiently, falling into openings, moving along contacts, and carrying fine grains away from weaker zones. Roots negotiate with it too, entering cracks where they can, widening them by the smallest amounts, and holding the loosened soil in place with a quiet, living grip. Even the wind negotiates, though more lightly, by drying exposed ridges and leaving sheltered hollows damp for longer periods. On the caldera rim, these small differences become visible in the plants, in the softness of the ground, and in the way mist lingers where the volcanic shape offers shelter. The rim is therefore never only stone, and never only vegetation, because each has learned the other's patterns over time. The old lava gives the slope its bones, while the living cover gives it breath, scent, color, and the gentle absorbent quiet that makes footsteps almost disappear. A fern leans from the side of the path, each divided frond holding tiny drops along its edges. Those drops shine faintly in the dimness, and for a moment they resemble a small constellation close to the ground, resting on a plant rooted in soil made from weathered fire. The image is simple, yet it contains the whole calm story of the rim. Heat became rock, rock became soil, soil held water, water fed leaves, and leaves now hold the evening in beads so small that they tremble only when the wind passes softly. Far below, where the caldera lake lies hidden, other waters are gathering in a broader way, receiving seepage and runoff from the encircling slopes. The lake's stillness depends on the rim's textures, on how water enters the volcanic ground, how it moves through fractures, and where it returns to the surface as flow. Some rain reaches the lake quickly as surface water sliding down saturated slopes after long wet hours. Some travels slowly underground, filtered through porous lava and ash, carrying dissolved minerals in amounts too subtle to see, and arriving later with the unhurried timing of the island's hidden plumbing. This delayed water gives volcanic landscapes a quiet complexity, because the surface view is only part of what is happening. Beneath grass and moss, water may be moving through old tubes, fractured flow interiors, rubbly contacts, and ash layers, following paths first created by cooling lava and later widened by weather. Lava tubes can form when the outer part of a basaltic flow cools and hardens, while the molten interior drains onward. In some volcanic regions, such tubes become caves, and though not every rim reveals them, the same idea of crust, channel, and drained space belongs to the larger language of flowing lava. On the Azorean rim, any hidden voids, fractures, or porous zones become part of the way the island stores and releases water. The rain does not simply strike a hard surface and run away, because volcanic ground can drink, pause, redirect, and return moisture slowly through springs and seeps. You follow the path through the damp air, and the thought of underground water makes the silence feel deeper. It is a silence with motion inside it, as the caldera rim breathes through hidden passages, letting cloud become soil moisture become spring water, and spring water become lake stillness. A darker patch of shrubs appears ahead, gathered where the ground dips into a shallow saddle along the rim. Saddles like this may form where weaker layers have weathered down, where collapse fractures guided erosion, or where lava did not build the crest as strongly as it did elsewhere, leaving a low place for mist to pool. The saddle feels peaceful, enclosed by rising ground on either side, and the wind quiets as you pass through it. Here the rim's unevenness becomes intimate, a soft hollow in the high edge, shaped by the same volcanic differences that make the caldera ring so varied and alive. You can sense how a future geologist might read this saddle as a clue, looking for rock types, fracture patterns, drainage lines, and the relationship between older flows and later erosion. Yet you can also understand it without naming it, simply by feeling how the land lowers, gathers dampness, and invites a slower pace. The path rises out of the saddle onto firmer ground, and the grasses become shorter where the wind touches them more directly. Beneath them, a more resistant lava layer may lie close to the surface, holding the crest higher and allowing water to drain away before the soil can become deep. Such high points are the rim's quiet anchors, not dramatic peaks, but durable sections where old flows give the edge a lasting shape. They have carried rain, hoofprints, roots passing cloud, and seasons of wind, while their dense interiors remain steady beneath the softened green. The island is full of these contrasts, though they are rarely sharp in the evening mist. A hard place becomes a rounded shoulder, a weak place becomes a hollow, a fracture becomes a line of wet vegetation, and together they form the soft grammar of the caldera rim. The grammar is slow enough to rest inside. You do not need to finish the sentence of the landscape because the rim keeps writing it with rain and roots, and every bend continues the thought into the darkening air. As you walk, the caldera opens briefly again, and the far wall appears as a muted slope suspended in cloud. Its surface is dark green and blue-gray now, but under that color are layers of erupted material, old flow faces, ash beds, and weathered zones that descend toward the unseen lake. The far wall seems still, and it is still on the scale of a breath, but it is not still on the scale of centuries. Soil creeps, blocks weather, water drains, plants root and fall, and the slope gradually relaxes from the sharper forms left by collapse into the rounded calm you see now. This relaxation is part of the way caldera rims become peaceful to the eye, because the land has had time to soften its brokenness. Even where the origin involved sudden subsidence or eruptive change, the present form is shaped by long recovery, by green growth, and by the gentle smoothing of time. The lava flows are part of that recovery too, because their durability allows the rim to endure, while softer parts are worn down. They act as quiet ribs in the landscape, not visible everywhere, but giving structure to the slopes and helping the caldera hold its broad, sheltering outline. The word shelter feels right here, even though the rim is open to weather, because the caldera interior has a gathered quality. The surrounding high ground folds wind, cloud, water, and light into a basin, and the lake below rests within that fold like a darkened mirror of the sky. You are still on the high edge, and the air around you has the coolness of early night. The stones near the path no longer hold visible color, only texture, and when your attention rests on them, they seem to have become small pieces of the island's long sleep. The history of lava flows can feel vast, but it is also very tactile, found in roughness under the hand and firmness under the foot. A vesicular stone, a dense block, a crumbly ash layer, and a slick, clay-rich patch after rain each tell the same story through different kinds of touch. Fresh lava begins with heat and chemistry, but the caldera rim you feel now is the result of many later touches. Cooling touched it first, then cracking, then rain, then mineral change, then roots, then weather again, until the old volcanic material became part of a living surface. This surface is not separate from the deep forces below, though it seems gentle and green. It is the visible end of a process that began beneath the oceanic crust, where melt formed and rose, and where the island's future outline waited inside the earth as possibility and pressure. Pressure is a quiet word here, not alarming, but foundational. Deep below, pressure helped shape melting and magma ascent, while at the surface, pressure changed as lava emerged, gases expanded, and bubbles formed in stone that would later lie under moss and rain. Those bubbles, frozen into vesicles, are little records of release. They show that even lava once carried dissolved gases, and that as it neared the surface and cooled, it opened tiny spaces within itself, spaces that now may hold minerals, moisture, or simply air. A vesicle in a stone beside the path is not large, yet it belongs to the same story as the great caldera hollow. Both are spaces formed by changing conditions, one tiny and one vast, one inside lava and one inside the volcano's summit, and both now rest in quiet. This similarity is gentle and pleasing because the island repeats itself at different scales. Small hollows in rock-hold droplets, larger hollows in the rim hold damp soil and ferns, and the great hollow of the caldera holds a lake beneath the slowly moving cloud. The path bends again, following the raised arc where old flows and later erosion have made a walkable line. You do not hurry because the rim offers no reason to hurry, only a sequence of soft slopes, wet stones, muted vegetation, and the patient downward pull of the land on either side. The inward side feels darker now, with the lake hidden in shadow, while the outward side carries a faint openness from the distant sea. Even unseen, the ocean is present, and the rim seems to listen to it through wind, moisture, and the steady arrival of Atlantic weather. This weather has been shaping the lava almost since it cooled. Rain falling on hot or newly cooled surfaces would have hissed, steamed, and run over dark rock at first, but later it entered cracks more calmly, beginning the longer work of alteration, soil formation, and softening. Over years, minerals in the lava changed, glass broke down, iron oxidized, and the surface became less like a cooled flow and more like a hillside. Then plants found openings, their roots widened small spaces, organic matter accumulated, and the rim grew its green cover, one quiet season at a time. The softness around you is therefore not a disguise over the volcanic story, but the next part of it, the vegetation does not hide the lava from meaning. It reveals what lava can become when ocean air, water, and life are given enough patience. A low wall of dark stones may appear near the path, partly swallowed by grass, its rocks gathered from the volcanic ground nearby. Each stone has been moved from one resting place to another, but its origin remains the same, and its rough surfaces still carry the cool textures of eruption. The wall follows the rim for a little while, then disappears into mist, like a line drawn softly and then allowed to fade. It adds a human trace without becoming the center of the scene, because the larger story belongs to the caldera, the lava, the weather, and the green quiet of the island. Beyond the wall, the ground falls inward in a slope that seems more felt than seen, a descending darkness under shrubs and low cloud. The slope's angle is controlled by many things, including the strength of lava layers, the weakness of ash beds, the presence of fractures, and the steady trimming of rain. Where water concentrates, it may incise small channels that later become softened by vegetation, turning lines of erosion into fern-filled folds. Where a dense flow projects outward, it may form a ledge or bench, catching soil above it and making the slope step down gently toward the caldera floor. These benches and folds give the inner wall a quiet complexity, and from a distance they blend into one continuous green descent. Up close, each change in steepness might tell of a different layer, a different cooling history, a different response to water moving through and over the rock. This is how lava flows shape not only the crest, but the entire rim environment. They influence the walls, the drainage, the soils, the vegetation, the lake's catchment, and the feeling of the path itself, which rises and falls with their hidden forms. The night gathers more fully now, and the rim becomes less a visible landscape than a presence around you. The mist softens the remaining edges, and the ground beneath your feet seems steadier, because the eye is no longer trying to travel across the whole caldera view. You can let the science become quieter too, not gone, but softened into awareness. Lava built layers, collapse made space, rain opened surfaces, roots held soil, and the rim you follow is the peaceful meeting of those processes in one darkening place. The path is still damp, and the air still smells of leaf and mineral earth. Somewhere below, water rests in the caldera basin, and somewhere beyond the outer slope, the Atlantic moves around the island with waves too distant to hear from this high edge. That distance is soothing, because the ocean's presence is wide but not loud. It surrounds the Azores, feeds the clouds, shapes the winds, and sends moisture over the volcanic heights, while the rim receives it all with the calm acceptance of cooled stone. A final pale band remains in the sky, and it lays a faint sheen over the grasses along the crest. Each blade seems separate for a moment, then blends into the next, just as each lava flow is separate in origin, but joined now into the larger body of the rim. You can think of the caldera as a kind of bowl, but it is a bowl made by earth processes rather than by hands. Its lip is irregular, layered, weathered, and alive, and its shape comes from the long cooperation of molten construction, summit collapse, erosion, and the settling gentleness of growth. The bowl does not feel empty. It holds lake water, mist, reflected sky, dark slopes, hidden springs, and the old hush of volcanic stone cooling through time into landscape and rest. As you continue along the rim, the path becomes almost the only visible thing, a pale dark ribbon through wet grass. The caldera beside you is sensed more than seen, and the lava beneath you is sensed more than named, yet both are present in every quiet step. The island has become a layered darkness, with the oldest lights no longer visible except in memory and form. Once, lava glowed here or near here, advancing under a heated crust, but now the only glow is the faint sheen of moisture on leaves and the muted sky caught in drops. That change from glow to dampness, from motion to support, from exposed heat to hidden foundation is the slow transformation that makes the rim so calming. It shows that landscapes can carry intense origins into peaceful shapes, and that even fire, when cooled by time and rain, can become a place of sleep. The mist moves across the crest again, and the path ahead fades into it without ending. You follow the curve a little farther, over old flows that have become soil, under cloud that has become rain, beside a caldera that has become a lake-filled hollow, and the island continues its long, quiet breath, where the breath of the island seems to move through the grasses, through the rim, and through the unseen fractures below the path. The darkness is not empty here, because it contains the shapes of the land more gently than daylight does, letting the caldera become a feeling of depth rather than a view to be measured. You keep moving at the same unhurried pace, and the rim rises a little underfoot, lifting you onto another broad shoulder of old volcanic rock. This shoulder may have formed where lava gathered thickly before cooling, or where a dense flow resisted erosion better than the softer beds around it, and now it feels simply like a calm swell in the earth. The grass is shorter on this exposed rise, brushed low by wind that has crossed the Atlantic and climbed the island's outer slopes. It carries moisture even when it feels light, and as it passes over the crest it leaves the stones shining, the leaves beaded, and the old lava quietly entered by water. Water is the slow companion of lava after the heat has gone, and here it has worked for countless seasons with patience rather than force. It has entered cracks, softened glass, washed fine grains into hollows, nourished moss, and helped shape the rim into the rounded green contour that holds the caldera close. You can sense the contrast between the original making and the present quiet, though nothing around you feels divided. The same place that once received molten rock now receives mist, and the same layers that once cooled from within now cool under night air, offering their surfaces to fern, lichen, and rain. The caldera opens for a moment through a low seam in the cloud, and far below the lake appears as a darker stillness inside the larger dark. Its edge is softened by distance, and the slopes around it descend without hurry, carrying the layered results of lava, ash, collapse, weathering, and long green growth. In daylight, you might see more clearly how the lake sits inside the basin, but at night, its quiet is enough. It reflects almost nothing now, except the faintest dimness in the sky, and it seems to rest within the caldera as water rests inside a stone bowl, made slowly by the earth. The rim above it is not a perfect lip, because the volcano was never a perfect vessel. It was built from eruptions of different tempers, some fluid and spreading, some thicker and more local, some fragmental and soft, and the rim keeps all those differences in its uneven line. Where lava flowed easily, it may have laid down broad, strong sheets, giving later slopes a durable base. Where magma fragmented into ash and pumice, the deposits may have weathered faster, and the rim may have lowered into saddles where mist now gathers like pale water poured into a shallow cup. These saddles and high shoulders make the rim feel alive under your feet, though its movements are slow enough to calm the body. You rise, ease downward, rise again, and the sequence becomes a kind of walking tide, guided by volcanic layers hidden beneath the grass. The old flows also shape the way sound behaves here, because dense rock, damp soil, vegetation, and mist absorb the small noises of the path. Your footfall does not travel far, and the caldera returns only silence, a wide, soft silence that feels held rather than hollow, as if the rim itself were listening with patience. The island's silence is not the absence of life, because insects, roots, leaves, and water are continuing their quiet work. It is simply a silence without hurry, where every process seems to know that the shape of the rim was made over a long time, and will keep changing over longer time. You pass another exposed stone, dark at its center, and rusty along one weathered edge, where iron has met air and rain. The color is muted in the dusk, but it still speaks of chemistry, of minerals changing slowly as volcanic rock becomes more open to the world of weather. Oxidation, hydration, dissolution, and the formation of clays are quiet words for quiet transformations, and they happen without spectacle in damp volcanic landscapes. Through them, The once hard surface loosens, gains texture, holds water differently, and becomes a place where roots can enter and organic matter can settle. The rim's soil is not separate from the lava. It is lava translated into a softer language. It contains grains that were once molten, glass that has altered, crystals released from cooling rock, and fragments of leaves that return each season to darken the ground with humus. This translation is slow and generous, and it lets the caldera rim support a richness that feels almost dreamlike in the mist. Ferns, grasses, shrubs, mosses, and lichens all find their places according to moisture, exposure, and mineral ground, while the old flows beneath them continue to shape the living pattern. The path now curves near a place where the inner slope drops more sharply, though the darkness and vegetation make the drop feel softened. The slope may follow a structural weakness from caldera formation, or it may expose layers of differing resistance. But from here, it is simply a deepening of shadow beside the trail. You do not need to lean toward it or measure it, because the rim offers enough in the contact between foot and ground. The old lava holds the crest, the soil cushions the path, and the mist keeps the world close, allowing the mind to rest inside the small circle of what can be felt. The caldera rim is a place of edges, but none of them feel sharp tonight. The edge between land and cloud has blurred, the edge between rock and soil has softened, and the edge between the present moment and ancient volcanic time has become a long, low continuum. In that continuum, lava flows are not only episodes of eruption, but layers of memory that still influence the island's breathing. They guide the rain, hold the slope, shape the vegetation, and create the uneven high ring where you walk under the Atlantic cloud with a quiet heart. The outer flank of the island appears again through the mist as a darker fall of land beyond the crest, sloping away toward the sea. There too, lava once traveled outward, following gravity down the volcano's side, widening the island in patient increments until waves met a broader shore of cooled stone. Those outward flows are connected to the rim, because the same volcanic system built both the caldera's raised edge and the descending flanks. The summit region gathered mass, the flows spread away, the inner structure changed, and eventually the caldera formed within a body of rock already shaped by many earlier journeys. A lava flow is a journey that becomes a place. It begins as molten movement, but it ends as surface, ridge, ledge, valley fill, soil parent, water guide, and finally as part of the quiet scenery where grasses bend in wind. This is why the rim can feel so calm while still carrying so much history, because the movement has not disappeared, only changed form. It has become the curve of the path, the contour of the slope, the line of the watershed, and the unseen strength beneath the wet earth. The night deepens further, and now the far side of the caldera is only a suggestion, a darker cloud within cloud. You are not lost in it, because the rim is steady underfoot, and the path continues with the slow confidence of land that has held its form through rain, wind, and years. In places, the old flows may have been cut by faults related to the caldera's settling, creating subtle lines that later erosion could follow. Such structures are often hidden under vegetation, but the landscape may reveal them in aligned hollows, springs, or changes in slope, quiet signs of deeper movement. These hidden structures do not disturb the peace of the place. They deepen it. They remind you that the rim is not a simple ring placed on the surface, but a three-dimensional body of rock, fractured, layered, weathered, and made gentle by the long work of climate. The climate itself is part of the caldera's shaping, because the Azores live under the influence of oceanic air, mild temperatures, and frequent moisture. This steady wetness encourages deep weathering, lush vegetation, and the gradual rounding of volcanic forms, so that lava-built rims become green highlands wrapped in cloud. Cloud forests and damp upland vegetation thrive where wind and elevation bring constant moisture, and the rim becomes a zone of quiet exchange between atmosphere and rock. Leaves gather fog, water drips to the soil, roots draw minerals upward, and the volcanic ground returns nourishment in an almost hidden cycle. You can imagine fog droplets collecting on leaves through the night, gathering until they fall in soft taps to the soil below. This kind of moisture, added even when rain is not falling, helps keep the rim damp and alive. making the old lava part of an ongoing circulation. The circulation moves slowly enough to be restful, from cloud to leaf, from leaf to soil, from soil to fracture, from fracture to seep, from seep to lake or stream. Each step follows the physical character of the volcanic layers, and so the old flows remain involved in the island's present breathing. A low place along the trail smells more strongly of wet earth, and the sound of a small hidden drip comes from the grass. The drip may be falling from leaves rather than from a spring, but either way it belongs to the same watery conversation between cloud, vegetation, and stone. The rim receives this conversation without answering in words. It answers in softness, in dark soil, in mossed rock, in rounded slopes, and in the calm persistence of a landform that has become home to both water and silence. When lava first cooled, it may have formed rough surfaces that seemed inhospitable, black and angular under the sky. Yet roughness is useful to life because it catches dust, traps seeds, gathers moisture, and gives roots small places to begin their patient entry. Over time, every roughness can become tenderness in a wet volcanic climate. A jagged fragment becomes a mossy stone, a crack becomes a fern bed, a flow margin becomes a sheltered bank, and the caldera rim becomes a corridor of green rest above the basin. The basin below is quiet now, and its lake is hidden again, but you know it remains there because the land keeps leaning toward it. The inner slopes gather the darkness in a broad curve, and the rim holds that curve with the old strength of flows that cooled long before this night. You follow the crest past another gentle bend, and the path narrows between grasses heavy with mist. Their tips brush close to the ground, and the movement is so slight that it seems less like wind than the island exhaling through its high meadow. This meadow has grown over volcanic material that may include ash from explosive eruptions, lava fragments from flow fronts, and soil made by weathering dense rock. The plants do not distinguish these origins as categories, but their roots respond to texture, moisture, and minerals, reading the geology through the simple language of growth. A grassroot entering a volcanic soil is a small event, yet it binds the rim more gently than stone alone can. Roots hold fine particles in place, slow surface runoff, add organic matter, and help the caldera edge remain clothed in vegetation even as rain continues its slow shaping. In this way, life protects the very form that supports it, and the rim becomes a partnership between cooled lava and living cover. The partnership is never final, because storms, seasons, and subtle slope movements keep adjusting it, but it endures through balance rather than stillness alone. The idea of balance feels natural here, where inward and outward slopes meet under cloud. On one side, the caldera hollow gathers water and shadow, while on the other, the island falls toward the ocean, and between them the rim holds a quiet, enduring middle. That middle was shaped by lava's ability to both flow and become firm. While molten, it yielded to gravity. While cooling, it gained structure, and once solid, it gave later rain and roots a material to work upon for the making of the rim. The rim is therefore both old movement and present rest, both former heat and current dampness, both geological process and living landscape. This blending is what gives it its atmosphere, because you can feel the depth of time without feeling pulled into urgency or scale. The mist begins to thin just enough for a few faint stars to appear above the cloud, though they come and go as vapor moves. Their light is quiet and distant, resting for brief moments above a land shaped by fire and rain, and the caldera rim seems to receive them with ease. Those stars are not the focus of the landscape, but they make the darkness feel wider, linking the island's high edge to the open sky. Below them, the old lava lies cool and dark, and between sky and stone the damp grasses hold tiny droplets that mirror the same dim glimmer. You continue in that glimmer, and the path feels familiar now, as if you have been walking this rim for a very long time. The repetition of grass, stone, mist, and curve becomes soothing, while the story of lava shaping the caldera edge settles into the background like a low tide. The tide itself is far below and beyond sight, moving around the island's coast in the darkness. It does not reach the rim directly, yet its ocean gives rise to the air that makes the rim damp, and so even the distant sea takes part in softening the volcanic land. This connection between high rim and surrounding ocean is one of the Azores' quiet signatures. The islands are volcanic, but they are also oceanic, and their calderas are shaped not only by magma and collapse, but by clouds born over water and carried inland with patience. Without the ocean's moisture, the old lava might keep more of its sharpness, more of its bare dark surface under the sky. With the ocean, it becomes green, softened, and richly weathered, a volcanic rim transformed into a calm upland ecosystem where the past rests under leaves. The leaves near the path are darker now, their shapes joined in shadow, and only the wet edges catch what little light remains. They seem to float at the border of visibility, rooted in soil that came from lava and breathing in an air that came from the sea. This is the quiet union of the place: sea air over volcanic stone, rain over ash, roots in basaltic soil, and lakes held inside collapse. Each part belongs to the others, and the caldera rim is where many of these relationships can be felt most clearly, even in darkness. A gentle rise ahead leads to another viewpoint, though the word viewpoint seems too bright for this hour. From there, you can sense the basin opening beside you, but the mist has turned it into softness, and the rim's edge feels less like a lookout than a place to rest. Resting on the rim, you might notice how the body becomes aware of the ground's deep reliability. Even though the volcano has a dynamic history, the present surface is calm, and the cooled flows beneath you give the feeling of an old foundation holding steady under night. That steadiness is real in the human moment, even if geology always contains change. The rim may weather, slopes may shift, water may carve, and plants may alter the soil, but all of this happens within a slow rhythm that lets the landscape feel profoundly settled. You let your thoughts slow to that rhythm, following the idea of lava cooling layer by layer. At first there was heat, then crust, then fracture, then stone, then weather, then soil, then grass. And now there is this quiet path through mist on the rim. The sequence has no sharp ending, because even now the story continues underfoot. Rain will fall again, roots will deepen, minerals will alter, slopes will soften, and the caldera will keep holding its lake within the old volcanic ring. The far lake may be unseen, but the basin holds its coolness, and a faint dampness seems to rise from the inner slopes. The air along the rim becomes almost like water, surrounding you with a soft pressure, not heavy, but enveloping, as if the cloud were a deep, slow current. You walk inside that current, and the island's volcanic story becomes a descent without leaving the high ground. Each thought moves downward into the layers, through grass and soil, through weathered ash, through old lava, through fractures and cooling joints, into the dark interior of stone. There is peace in imagining those layers, because they are quiet now. They do not glow, they do not speak, they do not rush, but they support the living surface above them with the unassuming patience of rock that has already given up its heat. Ahead, the path fades gradually into a darker stretch of shrubs, and the mist gathers thicker between their branches. You continue gently, letting the rim guide you, while the caldera beside you remains a deep bowl of shadow, and the old lava beneath your steps remains a cooled, hidden river. That hidden river no longer flows, except in the shapes it left behind. It flows now as slope, as drainage, as soil pattern, as plant habitat, as the curve of the caldera rim, carrying you onward through the damp Atlantic night. The quiet becomes wider, and the island seems to settle more fully into itself. Around you, lava-shaped ground, ocean-made cloud, and rain-fed green life rest together in the soft dark, and the rim continues ahead, patient and ancient, under the breathing mist. And the breathing mist settles into the hollows of the shrubs, softening each branch until the path feels enclosed by cloud and green. The rim is still there beneath you, steady and rounded, yet the world is narrowed to a few quiet textures: damp leaves, dark stones, and the slow curve of ground that keeps guiding you onward. Here, the old lava seems almost hidden completely, but hidden does not mean absent, because every surface still carries its influence. The slight firmness beneath the soil, the way water gathers beside the path, the rise of a low bank under moss, and the opening of a small saddle all belong to flows that cooled long before this night. You move past the shrubs into a more open stretch, and the air widens again, though the view remains mostly veiled. The caldera lies beside you as a deep quiet, and the rim feels like a shoreline around an invisible lake of darkness, shaped by lava, rain, collapse, and the long patience of weather. The idea of shoreline is gentle here, because the rim does hold an inner sea of its own kind, a basin of mist, slope, water, and shadow. It separates the inward world of the caldera from the outward world of descending flanks. Yet it also joins them, because both sides are made from the same volcanic body. That body was built by eruption after eruption, by molten rock reaching the surface and becoming part of the island's growing form. Some flows would have spread thinly and cooled into broad, level surfaces, while others thickened close to vents, creating high places that later helped frame the caldera's edge. When magma withdrew from beneath the summit, the overlying rock did not simply disappear, but adjusted, fractured, and settled according to the strength of the layers already present. The result was a hollow bounded by a rim whose form depended on earlier lava, on weaker deposits between flows, and on the hidden architecture of the volcano. This is why the rim feels uneven in such a natural way, neither broken nor symmetrical, but quietly responsive to its own history. It rises where durable lava endured, lowers where water and weather found gentler material, and curves where the entire summit system settled into its present shape. The mist shifts again, and a few lights from distant farms or paths might glow faintly beyond the outer slope, softened until they seem less like human signs and more like low stars caught in the air. They do not disturb the landscape, because the larger presence remains the caldera, the old flows, the damp vegetation, and the cloud moving slowly over volcanic ground. You let the distant lights fade from attention, returning to the ground at your feet, where the path has become a darker ribbon through the grass. Small stones press through the soil in places, their edges rounded by weather and footsteps, and each one may be a fragment of old lava loosened from the rim's hidden layers. A fragment can travel a short distance and still belong deeply to its source. It may have broken from a flow top, rolled from a small bank, rested in soil, been touched by roots, and settled beside the trail, carrying in its rough surface the cooled record of molten movement. If you picked it up, it might feel light if full of bubbles, or heavy if dense and crystalline. It might hold tiny pale minerals in dark ground mass, or rusty weathering along a crack, and even without names it would speak of heat, cooling, gas, pressure, and rain. You leave it where it rests because the stone is already where it needs to be in the quiet arrangement of the rim. Around it, moss grows in a shallow cushion, grass bends with moisture, and the soil receives the small returns of fallen leaves, turning the volcanic past into present softness. The path rises slightly again, and the wind becomes more noticeable, carrying a cool freshness over the crest. It passes through the grasses with a sound so even and low that it feels almost like breathing, while the old lava beneath remains silent, receiving wind only through the plants rooted above it. Wind cannot shape lava in the same intimate way water can, but it helps govern the rim's living surface by drying exposed ground and bending vegetation. Where the crest is open, plants stay low and tough. Where hollows shelter moisture, leaves broaden and moss thickens, and the volcanic form quietly decides the pattern of life. This pattern is not rigid, because every season adds its own small changes. A wetter year may deepen the moss, a storm may loosen a slope, a dry stretch may yellow the grass, and yet the underlying lava-built rim continues to hold the broad arrangement in place. Such steadiness invites the mind to release its need for sharp detail. You can know that basalt, trachyte, ash, pumice, fractures, and soils are all present somewhere in the rim, while also letting them become part of one calm sensation under the night. The caldera is quiet enough now that it seems to be listening inward, toward its own dark lake and slopes. If water moves below, it moves without reaching you as sound, and if leaves shift on the inner wall, the motion is absorbed by mist, distance, and the deep curved space of the basin. You follow the high edge without trying to see the bottom, because the unseen can be restful when it feels held rather than empty. The rim holds the basin holds the lake, The lake holds the sky, and beneath them all the old flows hold their cooled positions in patient stone. That nested holding gives the landscape its tenderness, even though its origin was volcanic. It is not a tenderness of weakness, but of forms that have settled into one another, where rock, water, cloud, and vegetation have learned to share the same slow contour. A stretch of the trail becomes smoother, perhaps where fine ash and weathered soil have gathered between resistant outcrops. Your steps feel cushioned there, and the ground seems to absorb weight more softly, as if the rim itself were layered with the memory of falling volcanic dust and later falling leaves. Ash can become very fertile when it weathers, because its glassy particles break down into minerals and clays that hold moisture and nutrients. On these islands, where rain and mild air return often, such materials help create soils that support the lush green cover draped over ancient flows like a blanket. The blanket does not make the rim less volcanic. It makes the volcanism visible in another form, because the richness of the growth depends partly on the minerals released from the same eruptions that built the caldera edge. You pass through a place where the vegetation smells almost sweet in the dampness, the scent rising from leaves, earth, and hidden roots. The air is cool on your face, and the path curves with such patience that walking feels less like travel and more like drifting along the outline of a sleeping island. Drifting is the right word for this hour, because nothing asks to be reached quickly. The rim continues, the mist continues, the old lava continues beneath the surface, and your attention can move as slowly as water seeping through porous stone after rain. Somewhere below, in the caldera basin, sediments are collecting at the edges of the lake, made from weathered rock, plant remains, and fine material carried down the slopes. Those sediments are another kind of memory, settling quietly year after year, while the rim above continues to feed the basin with tiny fragments of itself through time. In this way, the caldera is not only held by the rim, but slowly filled by it in the gentlest possible manner. A grain loosens, a leaf falls, a trickle carries silt, a slope releases clay, and the lake receives these offerings without sound, adding them to its dark and patient floor. The thought is soothing because it makes erosion feel less like loss and more like exchange. The rim gives a little of itself to the basin preserves the quiet record, and the island continues its cycle of shaping, softening, and settling. You keep to the crest, where the path remains visible enough to follow, and the mist begins to glow faintly with a hidden moon or distant cloud-reflected light. The glow is not bright, only a pale loosening of darkness, enough to reveal wet grass and the low backs of volcanic stones beside the trail. These stones have no need to announce their age, and the night makes them seem older than any number could express. They are simply there, cool and damp, shaped first by heat and then by everything that came after, resting within the long, slow patience of the rim. In places, the rim may include lava that cooled as blocky masses, their fractured surfaces once angular and unsettled. With time, those blocks become softened by weathering, partly buried in soil and finally covered in moss, until the roughness remains only as a hidden irregularity under the green cover. In other places, smoother flow surfaces may have created broad benches where soil could gather more evenly. These benches can support paths, meadows, or wet grassy shelves along the rim, turning old volcanic surfaces into quiet places where rainwater pauses and the wind moves low across the ground. The variety is subtle, and subtlety is part of the sleep of this landscape. Nothing leaps forward, nothing breaks the rhythm. The differences emerge slowly as changes in footing, scent, moisture, and the way the mist gathers along one curve and thins along another. You walk through those differences as through a long paragraph written by stone. Each clause is a slope, each comma a hollow, each joining word a flow contact or weathered seam, and the whole sentence of the rim moves gently around the caldera in darkness. The island's volcanic origin lies far below this quiet writing, in mantle heat, melting, ascent, and the reaching of magma through oceanic crust. Yet by the time those deep processes arrive at the rim as landscape, they have become grass underfoot, damp air, and the calm, rounded line that carries you through the night. There is comfort in that transformation from depth to surface. It means that what begins hidden and hot can eventually become open and cool, that internal pressure can become external shelter, and that rising magma can become a place for moss to rest. The path bends around a low outcrop that rises like a dark animal sleeping in the grass. Its form is softened by lichen and shadow, and though it may be part of a flow interior or a resistant block left by erosion, it now feels simply like a quiet companion on the rim. You pass it slowly, and the caldera side opens enough to show a faint descending slope, lined with vegetation that merges into darkness below. The slope's green cover hides much of its structure, but beneath it the old layers continue downward, carrying evidence of eruptions, cooling, faulting, and rain-shaped change. Those layers are not flat like pages in a closed book, because volcanic terrain is built on slopes and later disrupted by collapse. They tilt, thicken, thin, pinch out, break, and overlap, forming an architecture that water and weather reveal only gradually through springs, gullies, benches, and saddles. You can let that complexity remain soft, because the rim itself does not feel complicated when you walk it. It feels like a continuous curve, and the mind can rest in that continuity while understanding that below the green surface there are many histories folded together in stone. The distant ocean sends another breath of wind over the crest, and the mist moves aside for several slow moments. Above the caldera, the sky opens into a deeper grey blue, and the basin below becomes just visible, a shadowed hollow wrapped by the old volcanic ring. The ring seems immense in the dimness, yet it is made from details smaller than a hand, from cracks, grains, bubbles, crystals, roots, and droplets. This meeting of scale is one of the calm wonders of geology, that vast landscapes depend on tiny structures repeated patiently across space and time. A bubble trapped in lava can help make stone porous, and many such bubbles can influence how a layer weathers. A fracture can admit one thread of water, and many fractures can weaken a slope or feed a spring, while countless roots can bind soil over the caldera wall. The rim is therefore a collective thing, built not only by spectacular episodes, but by innumerable small agreements between material and condition. Heat agreed with gravity, cooling agreed with contraction, rain agreed with cracks, roots agreed with moisture, and the island became this quiet edge. The mist closes again, and the basin fades back into softness, as if the landscape has decided to speak more quietly. You accept the closing view without disappointment, because concealment is part of the rim's atmosphere, and the hidden caldera feels even more peaceful when held behind cloud. At night, the Azores can seem suspended between ocean and sky, and the high volcanic ground becomes a place where both arrive as dampness and shadow. The rim receives them without resistance, and the old lava beneath the path becomes a silent meeting ground for atmosphere, water, and earth. You can imagine the Atlantic around the island, dark and broad, while you remain high above it, on a ring of cooled flows. The sea is not visible, yet every breath of mist has crossed it, and every drop on the grass carries something of that surrounding vastness. This vastness does not make the place feel lonely. Instead, it makes the rim feel held within a larger calm, an island landscape rising from deep water and carrying its green caldera under the slow, clouded sky. The volcanic process that formed the island is part of that calm, because it belongs to Earth's ordinary way of renewing surface from below. Magma rises, lava cools, land grows, summits change, calderas form, and then weather and life take over the long, quiet work of softening. On the rim, you are standing in the softening phase, the long after, the time when old flows become scenery, soil, and habitat. This is the part of volcanic life most easily overlooked, but it is the part that fills the senses now, as moisture shines on grass and darkness gathers in the hollow. A small cluster of stones marks the edge of the trail, and water glistens in the spaces between them. Their arrangement may be accidental, shaped by runoff and footsteps, yet the stones themselves are fragments of the deeper volcanic order, carried upward into notice by weather and use. You step past them with care, not because of danger, but because gentleness suits the place. The path asks for quiet feet, and the rim, with all its cooled history and damp vegetation, seems to reward slow movement with a deeper sense of presence. Presence is what remains when the view disappears, when the science settles into the background, and when the body feels the ground more than the mind seeks explanation. The caldera rim is present as firmness, coolness, moisture, slope, and the steady inward pull of a basin hidden by mist. In that presence, lava flows are not remote events. They are the ground underfoot, the reason for the crest, the source of the stones, the framework for drainage, and the original material from which this soft upland ecosystem has been patiently made. The night continues to lower, but the rhythm of the place remains unchanged, long, slow, and unbroken. You move along the rim as if following the edge of an old dream, where molten rivers have cooled into meadows, and volcanic collapse has become a quiet hollow filled with shadow. Somewhere ahead, the path will continue beyond what you can see, around another curve, over another lava-shaped rise, through another patch of grass combed by ocean wind. The rim does not end in the darkness, it simply keeps turning, carrying the story of the Azores in its soft and durable arc. You follow that arc, and each step seems to settle more deeply into the island's pace. Beneath you, old flows rest in layered darkness. Beside you, the caldera opens unseen. Above you, cloud drifts across faint stars, and all of it moves together with the slow, quiet patience of stone cooling into sleep, while the sleep of the island gathers not as absence, but as a deeper kind of attention held in grass, cloud, and rock. The rim beneath you continues to curve through the night, and though the path is dim, its shape feels certain, as if old lava has become a quiet promise under every step. The air is cool enough now that each breath seems to enter slowly, carrying the damp mineral scent of volcanic soil and leaves. Mist gathers along your sleeves, on the tips of grasses, on the low stones beside the trail, and the whole caldera edge feels washed in a soft and patient darkness. You pass through a place where the ground underfoot becomes slightly uneven, a subtle roughness that may come from buried blocks or an old flow surface close below. The trail has worn itself over that surface gradually, smoothing only the smallest high points, while the deeper volcanic texture remains present beneath soil, roots, and moss. This is how the past stays near without becoming loud. It rises through the path as firmness, through the slope as shape, through the vegetation as pattern, and through the mist as moisture, drawn from an ocean that has surrounded the island since its first emergence into air. The caldera wall beside you is hidden again, yet you can feel the inward fall of the land through the way the sound disappears into it. Even silence seems to lean toward the basin, slipping down the green slopes toward the lake, while the rim holds you at the boundary between descent and height. That boundary was shaped by molten material that once followed its own downward tendencies, spreading across the volcanic surface wherever the slope allowed. Lava is guided by gravity when it is moving, and later, when it has cooled, it becomes one of the guides that gravity uses to shape everything else, from water to soil to root. A flow that cooled thickly may hold a slope in place for longer than the ash beneath it, creating a ledge that outlasts softer layers. A flow that fractured deeply may admit water, encouraging alteration and plant growth, and over time those differences become benches, hollows, damp seams, and gentle changes in the rim's profile. The night makes those differences less visible, but not less real. You notice them through small shifts in footing, through a sudden richness of ferns, through water shining along the path, and through the way the ground lifts beneath you like a slow thought rising from stone. Somewhere under the grasses, old flow boundaries lie like buried horizons, each one marking a moment when lava stopped moving and began to become landscape. Between them may be thin soils from pauses between eruptions, ash from later bursts, or surfaces altered by steam and rain before being covered again by younger rock. The rim is made from these pauses as much as from eruptions, because time between events allowed weathering to begin, plants to arrive, and surfaces to change. Then new lava came, sealing older ground beneath it, preserving some textures while adding new mass to the growing volcanic island. This layering creates a kind of quiet depth that you can imagine beneath every step, even without seeing it. The surface may be only grass and damp soil now, but below it are earlier surfaces, earlier rains, earlier exposures, and the cooled paths of flows that once moved under open sky. The path rounds a curve where the wind seems to fall away, and for a while the air is almost perfectly still. The mist hangs close among the shrubs, and droplets collect until they slip from leaf to leaf, making tiny sounds too soft to interrupt the broad silence. Each drop that falls is part of the ongoing shaping of the rim. It touches leaf, soil, and rock, enters the ground if the ground will take it, or slides along the surface if a denser layer waits beneath, and in either case it follows the old decisions of lava. Water does not forget the structure of the land. It reads every fracture, every porous band, every ash layer, and every slope angle, moving through the caldera rim as if tracing a map that was drawn first by heat and then revised by time. In the basin below, the lake receives the end of many such journeys, though tonight it remains hidden under mist and darkness. Its water may look still when seen from above, but it is connected to countless small movements, to seepage, runoff, evaporation, cloud and rain, all circling through the volcanic hollow. The rim holds this circulation like a quiet frame. It gathers weather from the ocean, divides rainfall between inward and outward slopes, supports the vegetation that slows runoff, and releases minerals from weathered lava into the waters that move through its body. You walk within that frame, and the movement of your own breath becomes part of the place for a little while. Inhale, and there is wet grass. Exhale, and there is cool cloud. Step, and there is old lava beneath you, patient and unlit under the trail. The island seems to have no need for sharp edges at this hour, and even the stones beside the path look rounded by shadow. Their surfaces may still be rough to the hand, pitted and granular, but the eye receives them as dark softness, pieces of cooled fire resting under mist. A place like this teaches that volcanic landscapes are not only about eruption, because eruption is only the beginning of a longer transformation. After the lava cools, the slower world arrives with rain, oxidation, moss, slope wash, soil, birds, roots, and the long settling of quiet. The slower world is the one surrounding you now. It is present in the dampness on your skin, in the cushioned ground, in the hidden lake, and in the way the caldera rim curves on without urgency through the night. You come to another low rise, and the path climbs it with a gradualness that feels almost like breathing uphill. The rise may be the remnant of an old lava lobe, a hardened body that stood firm while softer materials around it wore down, leaving a rounded prominence along the crest. From its top, the mist thins enough to reveal a pale patch of the caldera interior, more suggestion than view. The slope below appears briefly as layers of dark green fading into grey, and then the cloud folds back over it, returning the basin to its deep and gentle concealment. There is a comfort in how the landscape reveals itself only in portions. You are not asked to grasp the whole caldera at once, only to receive one softened glimpse, one damp stone, one curve of rim, and one slow breath of Atlantic air. The science also arrives best this way, not as a rush of facts, but as quiet understanding attached to what you can sense. Lava built the high ground, collapse opened the hollow, water softened the walls, and life clothed the rim, each process entering the next with patient continuity. Continuity is the feeling that matters most here. The molten past and the green present are not separate scenes, but phases of one landscape, like water changing from cloud to rain to lake, while remaining part of the same cycle. The caldera rim keeps this continuity visible even in darkness, because it is where many transitions meet. Inner slope becomes crest, crest becomes outer flank, lava becomes soil, cloud becomes water, and old volcanic heat becomes the cool support of a sleeping meadow. You descend slightly from the rise, and the ground becomes softer again where fine material has gathered in a shallow hollow. Moisture lingers here, and the plants grow thick, their leaves brushing together gently when the wind returns, making a sound like cloth moving slowly in another room. Beneath those plants, the hollow may follow a weakness between flows, or a place where loose volcanic fragments have weathered into dark soil. It may also be shaped by small surface runoff that has used the same path many times, each rain adding one more nearly invisible adjustment to the rim. Small repeated actions are the heart of this landscape now. The old lava made the possibility of the rim, but rain and roots make its present softness, and every quiet season adds itself without fanfare to the shape that you follow onward. The path straightens briefly, though the caldera's curve is still implied in the slopes around you. For a few minutes, walking feels almost suspended, as if you are moving along a high, damp bridge between two kinds of darkness, the inner basin and the outer sea. The sea remains unseen, but its weather surrounds you. It has lent the air its coolness, the mist its body, the grass its shine, and the whole volcanic rim, a climate gentle enough to turn rough lava into green abundance through the long work of moisture. In drier places, volcanic flows may remain stark for ages, their surfaces bare under sun and wind. Here, the Atlantic helps time move differently across the rock, encouraging chemical weathering, plant cover, and the deep green softness that makes the caldera rim feel more like a garden of stone than a field of fire. That garden has no single gardener, only processes moving together. Weather brings water, lava offers minerals, plants hold soil, slopes guide drainage, and the caldera gathers these relationships into a quiet ring of interdependence around its lake. You pass another stone wall, low and dark, partly absorbed by grass and shadow. It follows the rim for a short distance, then bends away toward the outer slope, its volcanic stones stacked into a human line that still belongs to the island's broader geology. The wall is calm because it uses the materials already present, stones drawn from the same cooled flows that shape the ground beneath it. Lichen grows on their faces, water rests in their cracks, and the wall slowly becomes another surface for the rim's damp ecosystem to claim. Beyond it, the land opens into a smoother, grassy stretch, and the mist spreads low over the ground, like a pale tide. You walk through it without sound, and the path beneath the grass seems to float over the dark body of old lava that holds the crest. The idea of floating returns often in this place, though you are walking on land, because the cloud and the softened ground remove any sense of harshness. The caldera becomes a depth of air, the rim becomes a slow current around it, and the lava beneath becomes the cooled bed of that atmospheric river. A lava flow and a river have similarities, though one is molten rock and the other is water. Both follow slope, both branch or concentrate according to terrain, both leave forms behind, and both can shape a landscape long after their movement has changed or ceased. The old lava rivers of the Azores cooled into ridges, benches, lobes, and layers, creating the material from which the caldera rim would later emerge. Now rainwater rivers, much smaller and cooler, continue the shaping by tracing the surfaces and hidden seams those lava flows left behind. The rim is therefore a meeting of ancient flow and present flow. One is solid now, the other moves quietly through soil and channel, and together they make the living form of the caldera edge, under cloud. Night deepens into a more complete blue-black, and the path is visible mostly by its faint difference from the grass. The world has become texture and direction, and the rim's curve is felt as a gentle turning in the body, rather than seen as a line in space. This is a peaceful way to understand geology, through the body's trust in ground and the mind's slow awareness of time. You do not need a diagram, because the rim itself is the diagram, drawn in slope, dampness, vegetation, and the calm strength of rock. The path reaches another subtle crest, and for a moment, the wind touches both sides of you, crossing from the outer flank toward the caldera. It carries a colder thread from the open Atlantic and softens as it enters the basin side, losing itself among shrubs and descending mist. Air, like water and lava, responds to the shape of the land. The rim lifts it, splits it, gathers it, and guides it along the crest. So even the movement of cloud at night belongs partly to the volcanic form made by earlier flows. Those earlier flows made topography, and topography shapes weather at a local scale, encouraging fog, condensation, shelter, and exposure in alternating bands. The rim is not just shaped by climate, it also shapes climate close to the ground, creating small pockets of dampness where moss thickens and leaves remain wet for hours. You notice a bank beside the path that is almost completely covered in moss, dark and full, like a small hillside of velvet. Beneath it may be a blocky lava surface or a pile of weathered fragments, but the moss has turned it into softness, holding water against the old stone. Moss is one of the quietest companions of volcanic rock. It asks for little, arrives where moisture persists, and begins to change the surface by trapping fine particles, holding water, and making a place for more life to gather slowly. In this way, even the smallest plants take part in shaping the caldera rim. They do not move mountains, but they help soften stones, stabilize soil, and create the conditions through which the hard volcanic edge becomes a green and breathing surface. You continue past the mossy bank, and the path narrows again, curving between low vegetation. The caldera lies just beyond, invisible but strongly present, as if the air itself remembers the hollow and leans toward it with a quiet inward pull. That pull is not physical enough to move you, yet it gives the place its atmosphere. A caldera rim always suggests depth beside height, opening beside enclosure, and on this Azorean night, the suggestion is softened by mist until it feels almost like drifting near the edge of a dream. The lava flows that shake the rim are part of that dream, but they are also entirely real. Their cooled masses, broken tops, resistant interiors, and weathered contacts make the ground you follow, and their chemistry feeds the soil that holds the plants brushing softly at your knees. The chemistry is slow and intimate. Rainwater becomes mildly acidic as it moves through air and soil, and when it meets volcanic minerals, it begins to loosen elements, form clays, and turn hard rock gradually into fertile earth. This process does not require drama. It happens in the damp dark, in the hidden pore spaces, in the hair-line cracks under moss, and in the soft soil beneath the path, where the old lava continues to become something more receptive to life. A faint brightness appears low in the cloud, perhaps moonlight diffused through vapor, and it gives the grasses a silver edge. The rim seems to glow not from within now, as lava once did, but from moisture and reflected sky, a cooler and gentler kind of light. That cool light is enough to show the path dipping toward another sheltered hollow, where shrubs stand thicker and the ground smells of wet leaves. You enter it slowly, and the air becomes still again, held between low banks that may mark old flow margins softened by time and growth. Inside the hollow, the caldera feels farther away, though it is just beyond the slope. The closeness of leaves and the softness of the ground make the world smaller, and the old volcanic architecture becomes a shelter rather than a panorama, a place where the night can settle. The hollow may have collected fine ash, soil, and organic matter because the rim's shape slows water and wind here. Such small traps matter in ecological terms because they create richer pockets where plants can root deeply, and those plants then deepen the pocket further with shade, litter, and moisture. Again, the process turns back on itself gently. Shape gathers soil, soil grows plants, plants hold water, water alters rock, and altered rock becomes more soil, while the caldera rim continues its slow transformation from volcanic structure into living landscape. You leave the hollow by a gradual rise, and the wind returns as a cool ribbon across the open crest. The caldera side opens briefly, and the lake below appears as a faint, dark oval under the mist, so still that it seems more like thought than water. Around that stillness, the slopes descend in silence. They are made of the same volcanic materials as the rim, but they have been drawn inward by the basin, shaped by gravity, runoff, and the settling memory of the caldera's formation through long years. The lake holds the result of those slopes, receiving water and fine sediment, reflecting cloud, and marking the lowest visible quiet inside the volcanic bowl. The rim, by contrast, holds the upper quiet, the place where wind and mist arrive first, and where the old lava still feels close under grass. Between upper and lower quiet, the caldera becomes a whole world. It has its weather, drainage, soils, plant zones, rock layers, and still water, all enclosed not by walls built in a moment, but by the long altered remains of volcanic making. You linger at the open place without stopping in any sharp way, simply slowing as the view loosens and softens again. The lake fades, the slope fades, the far rim fades, and what remains is the immediate touch of mist on skin and the steady ground beneath your feet. There is no need for the landscape to stay visible to be present. The caldera continues in darkness, the lava continues beneath soil, the water continues its hidden passage, and the night continues to gather every process into one deep and patient quiet. You follow the rim onward, and the path seems to become smoother, as if made for drifting rather than walking. The old flows under it do not move, yet their shapes guide your motion, and your pace becomes another small, temporary rhythm added to the island's long breath. This breath is made of many things, not lungs, but cycles. Cloud rises, rain falls, lava weathers, plants grow, sediment settles, lakes reflect, and the caldera rim remains the high green curve where these cycles touch and turn. The darkness grows softer rather than deeper because your eyes have learned its tones. Dark grass, darker stones, pale mist, and the hidden hollow beside you arrange themselves into a calm pattern, and the old volcanic ground feels less like history than home. Home, in this sense, belongs not to people, but to processes that have found a resting shape together. The lava has found rest as rock, the rain has found paths, the plants have found moisture, and the caldera has found its quiet form within the island's heart. You pass a final open stretch of this portion of the rim, where the wind is light and the mist lies low over the grass. Ahead, the path bends into shadow, carrying the same curve forward, and beneath it the cooled flows continue in darkness, patient, layered, and still. The island asks for nothing but slowness now. It offers damp air, old stone, a hidden lake, and a rim shaped by lava into a place where even the night seems to settle gently, grain by grain, drop by drop, breath by breath,